Thank you very much for the introduction, Mike, and thank you very much to you for turning up here to listen to Diurnal Group. This is our first visit to Edinburgh, and we are a specialty pharmaceutical company and probably a rarity in the UK biotech space in that we've taken a product all the way from concept all the way through to regulatory approval, and now we're on the cusp of generating our first commercial revenues. So we are an AIM-listed company. We listed on AIM in December 2015. Share price 144p, current share price 195p, market cap around 120 million. We have a strong cash position. At the end of the last calendar year, we had 14 million in the bank, and just last month completed a further funding round of £10.5 million, bringing 14 new investors onto the share register. Our key investors are long-term institutional holders such as IP Group, Finance Wales and Invesco, and we have a clean balance sheet with no debt. Importantly for Diurnal, we have a highly experienced team in developing and commercialising pharmaceuticals. We have Peter Allen as chairman, over 20 years of experience of board positions, mainly in the city, and has led a number of companies to successful exit, including Celtec and ProStracan, which you might be familiar with. I am the Chief Executive Officer, 20 years experience in the biotech industry, a scientist by background, and outside of Diurnal, my greatest achievement to date has been to develop and commercialise a high-dose vitamin D preparation, which is available on prescription only, manufactured in Scotland, and is the highest selling vitamin D preparation in the UK. I'm joined here this evening by Richard Bungay, our Chief Financial Officer, sat here in the front row. Richard has over 20 years experience of working in both large and small biotech companies. And finally, our Chief Scientific Officer is an eminent endocrinologist or hormone doctor, Professor Richard Ross. He's also founder of the company. So in terms of our investment summary, we're really focused around the endocrine space in terms of endocrinology. When we say endocrinology, we mean hormones, and we see that as a huge $10 billion market opportunity. We are initially focused around a specific sector of endocrinology and focusing on diseases of cortisol deficiency, and I'll come to those in a minute, and that's an opportunity worth around $3 billion per annum. Our first product, Alkindi, was launched just this month, just a couple of weeks ago in Germany, following European market authorization in February of this year, and that enables us to market to all 28 countries in the EU. The key thing about Alkindi and our second product, Chronocort, is that we have the ability to commercialise these products ourselves, and the reason for that is that the prescriber base is very specialised for the diseases that we're interested in. So, for example, in the UK, patients that have our diseases, they're clustered around specialist treatment centres, university-type hospitals, and there are around 17 such centres in the UK, around 120 such centres in the big EU5. And therefore, the opportunity for Diurnal is that we can target these centres with a very modest sales force, perhaps 20 to 30 reps at peak in Europe, and commercialise these products ourselves. Our second product, Chronocort, is for adults who suffer from these diseases of cortisol deficiency. It's a market of around $300 million per annum, and that is due to complete its pivotal phase 3 trial in Q3 of this year, with readout in Q4, and market authorization is anticipated in Europe in 2020. We are seeking commercialization partners in the US and the rest of the world, and we've already signed 2 such deals for the rest of the world already. Our products are built around strong commercial exclusivity. We deal in orphan or rare diseases, and this affords 10 years market exclusivity for our products post-market authorization. And this is supplemented by a wholly owned Diurnal patent portfolio, which is coming to grant in all major territories, and that can extend the commercial exclusivity period out all the way to 2034 and provides a very strong barrier to entry for any potential competitors coming into this space. And we have an earlier stage product pipeline entering clinical trials, which we hope will be valuable in the medium to long term. So with those attributes, it's our ambition, our vision to become a world-leading endocrinology specialty pharmaceutical company. As I mentioned, the opportunity is all around the endocrine system, all around hormones, and hormones are essential in regulating everyday healthy life. They involved in metabolism, growth, sexual development. Unfortunately for patients that cannot produce certain hormones, this leads to often chronic diseases. So once you don't have a hormone, you need a replacement therapy for life, and it has serious healthcare impacts on the patient. Now, when we talk about endocrinology, the hormone that springs to mind is insulin, the disease is diabetes. And in fact, large pharmaceutical companies have focused their efforts over many, many years on diabetes. It's a huge market, it's over $50 billion per annum. But if you speak to endocrinologists outside of diabetes, then actually there's a multitude of diseases where patient needs are going unserved. You can see here on the right-hand side of a Venn diagram. And these are often chronic, paediatric, orphan diseases where patients have really poor outcomes and very little in terms of treatment options. And this is very much the space that Diurnal is focused at. Now, of course, Diurnal, being mindful of its size, can't tackle all of these diseases in one go, and therefore we've decided to focus down on diseases of cortisol deficiency. So this slide just gives a snapshot of our development pipeline. We have Alkindi here, which is now approved and launched. We have Chronocort, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is going through late-stage clinical trials and will read out at the end of this year. And then beyond that, we have this other pipeline of products which are coming into the clinic, as with our oral native testosterone replacement, which is now in clinical trials here in the UK, and then some earlier stage assets here dealing with other endocrine diseases. So what I'll do is I'll focus on our two lead products, Alkindi and Chronocort, and why we're developing these for diseases of cortisol deficiency. So cortisol is an essential hormone for life. Without cortisol, you will die. And for those patients that cannot produce cortisol, they'll need to have a replacement for the rest of their lives. So cortisol deficiency results in fatigue, depression, and it can lead to death through what's called an adrenal crisis. We don't have enough cortisol on board to fight off infection. And there are two distinct diseases of cortisol deficiency. The first is adrenal insufficiency, and this is an acquired loss of cortisol, and this typically occurs in patients during their lifetime, where they lose the ability to produce cortisol. Symptoms are chronic fatigue, and you're at risk of death through an adrenal crisis. And the second disease is a genetic disease which is present from birth, which is called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH for short. And here the patients suffer from two issues. The first is they suffer from the chronic debilitating fatigue symptoms that you have in adrenal insufficiency. But secondly, these patients have a build-up of sex hormones or androgens in their body. And this is because CAH is caused by an enzyme block in the body. So basically, cortisol cannot be produced in the body, and the building blocks of cortisol, which are these powerful sex hormones, build up behind the block. It's like a dam. They can't be converted to cortisol. And these are potent testosterone-like molecules which buzz around the body, causing damage. So for example, if you're a little girl that's born with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, you've got testosterone-like molecules in your body. You may be born with ambiguous genitalia, so little girls look like little boys, may require corrective surgery during their lifetime. Both little boys and little girls go through puberty incredibly early on in life, perhaps the ages of 5 or 6 years of age. So we grow very tall and very quickly as young children. But when it comes to the normal years where puberty should occur, the teenage years, actually growth is turned off. Therefore, these patients typically end up being a lot shorter in adulthood, and then have complications in terms of fertility, metabolism, and ultimately this patient group will die younger than the normal population by some 7 years. So really it's this Diurnal's ambition to develop high quality therapeutic products to treat these diseases all the way from birth through to old age, and that's a real opportunity that we have to develop these products for these patients for the first time. In terms of significant value inflection points we expect over the next 3 years, I've already mentioned that we have Alkindi approved and now launched in Europe. We are also progressing very well with Alkindi in the US. We're just carrying out our final study that's required for registration of this drug in the US. We expect to finish that towards the back end of this summer and then go back to the regulator in the US, the FDA, to apply for market authorization, which is an anticipated approval is around 2020. In terms of Chronocort, which is our second product, which is for adults with these diseases, our phase 3 trial will finish and read out towards the end of this year. And again, estimated approval in Europe is in 2020. In the US, it's taken a little bit longer to come to consensus with the regulator, the FDA, and we are just about to start our Chronocort study in this genetic disease, CAH, in the US around the middle of this in this year, in 2 or 3 months' time. And importantly, what this provides to us in the US is that actually gaining approval in the CAH indication actually opens up Chronocort to a much larger market opportunity in adrenal insufficiency, which is worth some $2.7 million worldwide. And therefore, this is a very low-risk approach that we're using of taking a product that's approved in one indication and then using it for a related indication, particularly in the US, where there are no competitors in adrenal insufficiency. In terms of the competitive landscape, it's very favourable for Diurnal. We're dealing with rare and orphan diseases, and actually there's been very little innovation in this area for about 60 years. So typically these patients in the past have been replaced by the synthetic version of cortisol, which is hydrocortisone. I'm sure this is a molecule that you're very familiar with. And for these patients that cannot produce cortisol, they need to have hydrocortisone replacement taken by the oral route every day. And really the only product that's been developed in the past 60 years is a one competitor product we have in Europe, a product called Plenodren, currently marketed by Shire, soon to be Takeda. It is only approved in adrenal insufficiency. It's not approved for CAH, which is our first target indication, and it's only approved in Europe. However, Plenodren is very useful because it provides us with a reference price in Europe of $6,300 per patient per annum, and that is a price that we have achieved following our launch in Germany, and that's very much in line with our and market expectations. Beyond Europe, there's actually very little competition. There's no competition in adrenal insufficiency in the US, no products being developed. There are a handful of competitor products for the first indication, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, vying for exclusive rights in the CAH market. All of these programs are significantly behind us in development. We're just about to start our phase 3 trial in the US. These products, the most advanced, has only completed its phase 2, and we know they're going to need to repeat that phase 2 trial as well. And for orphan drug designations, it's first to market that gets the 10 years market exclusivity in Europe and 7 years market exclusivity in the US. So just focusing in on our products. First of all, Alkindi, which is designed to treat children from birth. And the real opportunity we have for Alkindi is that this is the first licensed hydrocortisone product for children from birth in Europe that has been licensed. So up until now, this is what children have had to take in Europe. This is crushed or compounded hydrocortisone in a completely unlicensed manner to achieve the correct dose that children need. When you crush hydrocortisone, it's bitter and unpalatable to taste. There's poor compliance for patients that take this. But more importantly than that, these patients have simply been receiving the incorrect dose of hydrocortisone from birth, and this is a life-saving drug that they need to receive. And you can see very clearly by eye that these should all be the same dose, the same level of powder in these pharmacy compounded capsules, and they're all of differing levels. And we came up with a very simple solution, which was Alkindi, which is beads containing hydrocortisone, which can be given as a sprinkle directly into the mouth or to be sprinkled on food and given in paediatrically acceptable doses of 0.51, 2 and 5 milligrams, and to compare that to the lowest dose strength tablet you can receive in Europe, which is 10 milligrams, which is way too much for these patients. So we received the good news earlier on this year that we had our Alkindi licensed for Europe for children from 0 to 18 years suffering from paediatric adrenal insufficiency, including congenital adrenal hyperplasia. We have now got first commercial sales in Europe following launch of Alkindi in Germany, and we have market access plans in place for a timely launch across Europe. So although approval in Europe is on a European scale, so technically we can market to all 28 countries now, actually pricing and reimbursement is done at a national level, and we're going through that process in the countries that we wish to launch across Europe. Importantly, having secured the market approval by this what's called a PUMA route, or Paediatric Use Market Authorization, this gives us 10 years data and market exclusivity from a date of market authorization. So we've got market exclusivity in Europe until 2028 on the PUMA alone, until 2034 based on our granted patent portfolio. Our European commercialisation strategy, we're working with Ashfield Healthcare to provide our sales team on a cost-plus basis, and we have a number of staff across Europe covering Germany, UK, France, Italy and Spain, and this supplements our very experienced in-house commercial team. We have a very experienced commercial director, Mike With, 20 years experience launching these types of products across Europe. And using this contract sales model with Ashfield, we believe that this is the most rapid and efficient way we can build out our sales team across Europe without the need for costly upfront investment and infrastructure. And really we believe that by marketing our products ourselves, this is the optimal way to retain the full value of Alkindi, and also the same sales force will also be used for our second product, Chronocort, in due course. So with Chronocort, this is what we call a modified release hydrocortisone, and what we're trying to do in adults is to recreate the very distinct daily circadian rhythm of cortisol that exists in healthy individuals, which is shown here by the orange line here. If you have congenital adrenal hyperplasia, you do not have this rhythm that is essential for life. And what physicians have tried to do is to try and recreate this rhythm over a period of time and not been able to do it with the drugs that have been available. We've managed to achieve that using Chronocort, using what we call a toothbrush regimen. So you take Chronocort lasting at night, first thing in the morning, it recreates a rhythm, but importantly, it controls the sex hormones and androgens which cause so much damage to the patient's body. So in our initial phase 2 trial that we carried out in patients with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, at the beginning of the trial, at best, only 31% of patients had their androgens controlled into the optimal range. They were switched over to Chronocort, and after 6 months, 94% of patients had their androgens controlled into the optimal range, which was a highly statistically significant result. We've now taken that through into our pivotal phase 3 study design, and in terms of our design in Europe, what the regulators wanted to see, they just wanted to see adequately powered a repeat of our phase 2 study, which is already successful. So they just wanted to see that in 122 patients. These have now all been recruited and enrolled. The last patient will finish the study in Q3 this year, and we'll have a readout in Q4. And really we believe that this is a significantly de-risked phase 3 study in the space. In the US, similar study design that has been agreed with the FDA, but significantly different from the European design, which means we have to carry out a separate study in the US. Again, we've agreed the patient numbers now with the FDA and the endpoints, and that study will start in the next couple of months. And just to describe our strategy for the rest of the world, we are entering into marketing and distribution agreements with companies that can work with us to take the European data package, adapt it for their own national needs, and then achieve registration in those territories. We've already signed a deal with Medison for Israel and Emerge Health for Australia and New Zealand. We recently had our patents granted in Japan, and Japan is the third largest pharmaceutical market after the US and Europe, and we're looking for partners in that market now. So the outlook for 2018, one of the key things in Diurnal is that we have achieved all of our milestones since IPO, and we've continued hitting our milestones in 2018. And there are some significant value inflection points coming up towards the end of this year. So I'd just like to say to finish to say that we believe that we're very much on track to becoming a world-leading endocrinology specialty pharma company, starting off with these diseases of cortisol deficiency, broadening out into other endocrine diseases, and we are now revenue generating with our first product, Alkindi. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Once your exclusivity period is elapsed, how hard or easy would it be for a generic guy to come up with a competitor to you?
It will be easier for them because they can reference our data for their submission package. Up to that point, what the exclusivity period gives us is they can't use our data or reference our data to show that they're either equivalent or superior. So actually, it really is a high barrier to entry right until that exclusivity period expires.
Any questions? Lady just here.
If I understood your slide well, I hope I'm remembering, is it Chronocort, the one that's coming through the pipeline later this year? You mentioned you had a competitor in Europe. I think you said it was Shire. Why doesn't Shire take that drug to the US and get the orphan status before you?
Yeah, no, very good question. I mean, so the answer is that Shire did try to take that product to the US, and it was rejected based on the data that they presented.
You, along with other contributors and our presenters, have mentioned Europe, and you've mentioned it more than anyone else. Is there any implications for, I hate to use the word Brexit?
Well, I think, again, a very, very good and topical question. I mean, we've thought long and hard about the implications of Brexit. We, particularly in the supply chain that we have developed at Diurnal, it's all within the European economic zone, within the European Union. We've also set up a Dutch subsidiary that holds our market authorization for Europe. So actually, in terms of our market authorization, that is absolutely safe and sort of Brexit-proof, if there is such a term. The one thing we don't know is how we can, post-Brexit, get a drug back into the UK, but I'm sure there'll be some sort of arrangement that will allow us to do that.
No questions? Do you manufacture yourself, or do you put it out to subcontractors? No,
so that's outsourced. It's outsourced to a family-run company in Germany called GLAT, very experienced company with technology that we use. The technology is available in over 100 commercial products, products such as Contact 400, which you can get over the counter. So very low cost of goods. These guys are worldwide experts in this technology. We've really optimized the manufacturing process to get the cost of goods down as low as possible. Actually, we have been operating at a commercial scale for a long, long time now for Alkindi with GLAT. And in terms of the scale-up risk, that has completely gone away.
We've talked with other presenters about, I suppose, exit strategies on products and things. Is there an exit strategy, or you can continue to research and get manufactured and sell? Is that the business model, or would you sell one of your products to another pharma?
Well, certainly what the management would like to achieve, and importantly what our investors, our major investors, would like to achieve, is to build a specialty pharma endocrinology company for the long term. And that's a company that can take products to market. We've got that ability now to generate revenues. But as we know in the pharmaceutical sector, once you start bringing products to market, because it is a rarity, and you do start generating revenues, then you may become an acquisition target for some of these other larger companies that have more developed and larger commercial sales teams.
So
So we can't rule that out, but it's not our ambition to just generate some revenues and then be sold.
On that basis, it doesn't happen. Obviously, you have got a small amount of cash coming. Obviously, you just started sales a couple of weeks ago. And looking at your pipeline, it looks like it's probably going to be sort of 2022 before you get sort of cash positive. Is that the right reading? Or?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, Mike. So if you look at the analyst notes and that follow us, then you're looking at 2021, 2022 is our break-even point, and by that point we'll have 4 approved products in our 2 major territories, Europe and US, and hopefully be generating a significant amount of revenue.
That's quite a pivotal time for a business like yours, isn't it, when you get to cash positive?
It is.
Question over here.
Sorry, I just remembered, I think you might not have the 20 million cash anymore, but it looked like you might have had 20 million cash. I think you said you raised 10.5 recently and you had 14 or something at your end. How do you have that, and what are you planning to do with it?
So the let's say call it approximately 20 million cash that we raised or had in total about a month ago. That's being deployed to start the US studies, to kickstart those. Studies are expensive. That's being deployed to use there. We will most likely need to go back to the markets at some point to complete those studies in the US, and also if we have positive data from Chronocort, we will deploy that cash to take that product through the regulatory process in Europe, and subsequently the commercialisation of that product in Europe as well.
Time's up. Thank you very much indeed, Martin. Thank you.